was the name of her town. You like the way I say it?
Yes.
Right? I tried to learn Polish when I was little because my parents spoke it. And I said, oh, gee, I'd like to know how to speak that. Anyway, it was in Galicia, a little shtetl, and about 600 to 800 Jews, if that. My mother was talented in sewing and other handcrafts, so she was sent away to a vocational high school to learn fashion design and dressmaking. The school was located 120 miles away in a city called Lviv, which was then part of Poland, but now it's in Ukraine. When the Germans marched into Poland on September 1st, 1939, my mother's family felt they must immediately reunite with their oldest daughter, my mother, who was in Lviv studying. They immediately loaded whatever belongings they had onto a wagon. And there were 5 children ranging in age 19 to 6. They were very lucky to leave their hometown when they did, because the Nazis arrived a day or two later and they forced the Jews to pour kerosene on the one synagogue in town and then dance around it as it burnt. Most of them were later shot in the nearby forest or gassed later at the extermination camp in Belzec. My mother and her family reunited in Lviv, and within a short time there were close to 200,000 Jewish refugees from Poland who had escaped towards Russia to Lviv. Now, some of you may not know, but Germany and Russia decided to split Poland. So this was in the Russian side, and my mother's family were extremely lucky to be on the Russian part. And again, all these people had escaped the German invasion into Russia. And then something miraculous happened. Most of the Jews who were then in Lviv and other parts of eastern Poland owned by Russia at that time were put on freight trains by the Russians and transported way, way deep into eastern Russia to Siberia, to the political labor camps called the Gulag. And why was this a lucky break, even a miracle? Because, as one historian wrote in 2013, Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin inadvertently saved Polish Jews from the Nazi death camps and gas chambers by deporting them to Siberia and other parts of the USSR. In 1940, 1 year before the Nazis commenced their program of extermination, Stalin ordered the deportation of some 2 to 300,000, as much as 300,000 Polish Jews from Russian-occupied eastern Poland to Gulag labor camps. Notwithstanding his virulent anti-Semitism and his own sanctioning of the killing of Jews within Russia itself, Stalin's order ironically saved these Jewish lives. And they represented the bulk of Polish Jewry who survived the Nazi Holocaust. I mean, I've noticed that, when I talk to people, children of survivors, my parents were in Russia, this one's parents were, if you were in Poland, how many places to hide were there? Homes and, Polish houses and cellars, but this was a huge group. The conditions in the Russian labor camps were not great, but the Russians, I'll try to shorten it, they were not out they were not intended, they were intended for internees to serve as forced labor. That's all. They were not, so they made them work. Food was not plentiful, but there was enough. If an intern was pregnant, she would get care. And unlike Nazi camps, there was no genocidal machinery, but the conditions were still brutal. And then people listed, I'm going to run through this, different, the big problem were bed bugs and lice. And you hear that so much from survivors, that bed bugs and lice were terrible, but they also worked hard in the fields, on farms, in mines, but they were working and they were living. If they didn't have much to eat, but they were alive. They weren't put in gas chambers. At some point in the war, the Polish government in exile, located in England, reached an agreement with the Russians to allow all these nationals of theirs to leave the gulags and migrate to wherever they wished within Russia. So everybody went south. As you can imagine, my mother's family moved to Tashkent, Uzbekistan, and after the war was over, the entire family, 5 kids and parents, and they all stayed alive, thank God. And they also migrated to Salzburg, Austria, where my mother met my father. And then family members, my mother and father went to Palestine, and a brother went to Canada, and the rest came here. And it took until 1952 for them to be allowed to come here. Could you imagine? The quota. So that's pretty much, and then after a number of years in Israel, Israel was established, and life was very hard in Israel, in the early years especially, and they decided to come here because they had a family who would sponsor them. And here I am, American and Israeli. And